Hello, my name is Kelly Simmons. I'm a music education coordinator at Canada's National Arts Centre. Welcome to Ottawa, Ontario. This is part 3 of a 3-part series on Holst's first suite in E-flat for band. In this third and final video, you will get tips from Donald Renshaw, principal trombone with the NEC Orchestra, on a number of subjects, from suggested recordings to understanding the role of the trombone in the first suite.
Hi, my name is Don Renshaw. I'm principal trombone of the National Arts Centre Orchestra. And today we're going to be talking about and working on Gustav Holst's first suite in E-flat for military band. Written in 1909, I think first performed in 1920. And it was this answer to the desire for him to write to have music for a symphonic band, specifically for that kind of group. Holst was a fabulous trombonist himself who played in the Scottish orchestra. Anyway, without further ado, I'd like to continue in this with 3 parts brass series, having featured my esteemed colleagues Karen Donnelly on trumpet and Lawrence Vine on horn. Now, to get into it, just general comments. My high school teacher, Mr. Etienne, used to say, "It's not practice, it's preparation." And what does that mean? Well, it's to be able to delve into the actual details of a piece and what makes it tick, how our part fits in, whether it's a supportive role or, the melody itself, percussive effects, all sorts of different kinds of facets of playing that become involved. So no matter what you play, what kind of music you prepare, this is a general kind of a rule of thumb for preparing. And you have to be kind of ready to embrace what we call, repetition, certain amount of that required for developing your muscles and coordination in playing the right notes at the right time. And so, no matter what kind of music, you have to play with a good, even sound throughout the registers, solid intonation, consistent, clean articulations, accurate slide positions and coordination, and, of course, appropriate style. Another teacher, actually my very first teacher, private teacher, said, "Play, sing, play." So we would play a melody, and then I would sing it and get it really into whether it was rhythmic or just kind of a concept of the melody, but not encumbered by the instrument. You kind of remove that variable for a moment, and then play it again on the instrument. And I really found it remarkable how you can get what it is that's in your head, your voice, and translate it into the instrument itself. So that's one kind of a way of thinking about it. Another thing is that a lot of our work, we talk about talent and whatnot, but 90% of it is perspiration, 10% inspiration. So it's just a lot of hard work. And what we mean by that is you study the score to the piece. You get, like a microscope, you get closer and closer and, more finally a stronger lens focused on certain parts of the piece where you're involved, and just to find out what it is, what's your role. Is it supportive? Is it a melodic, having a leading line? But these are all important things that we need to be aware of. And of course, intonation, to make sure, are we blending with somebody else? Was it be the horns or the trumpets or clarinets, different instruments in the group. We need to know what's happening, the big picture, like the conductor sees. Yeah, that's it. Now, just a couple of suggestions. There's a couple of recordings I'm really suggesting that you hear. It was very inspiring to me. It's Gustav Holst wrote something called The Planets. And if you haven't heard it, please give it a listen. Fantastic piece. So much talent in orchestration and different styles. And just wonderful piece to listen to. Another one is something that actually involves a type of technique, or I should say style, where it's tenuto, very broad and connected, but well-defined. And a good example of that, an inspiring example, is the opening to Mussorgsky's Pictures at an Exhibition, the trumpet. Ba, 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 da, 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 dee, da. That's kind of very broad and tenuto. So we'll get into that kind of thing. So without further ado, let's get to work on the Holst suite in E-flat. So here we are in the first movement of the Holst. And the opening passage is in the legato style, which is a kind of a syllable, da, 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 la, la, for those familiar with legato playing on trombone. And what's very important is that you coordinate the movement, a swift movement of the slide with the tongue. And a great way to do that is our best friend, the metronome. So I'll turn that on. I've set it to 90 for this movement. Different versions have slightly different speeds, but just for the ballpark kind of figure. So here we go. 1, 2, 3. That's that. All right. Just an example of how to work with the metronome. Often I'm thinking subdividing 1 and 2 and 3, just for absolute accuracy. And actually, that's a good thing to do with the next passage at letter A, where you have to put your notes in with the dum da da dum. Other players go dum da da dum da da dum da da dum. And what can happen is the second 16th can get lost. So just to make note of that. So almost think of exaggerating the second 16th. 1. Yeah, it comes out sounding even that way. Okay. And then you have the melody before B. And good thing is to just really work out the breathing marks. So you have a nice phrase, a nice line. Da, da, dee, da, dee, da, 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 boom, boom. Yeah, so right in the commas, the breath marks purposefully, and then stick to that. It's very important. So you have 1. And the style is what we call tenuto style. The 3 styles, staccato, legato, tenuto. Tenuto is like what I mentioned, the opening of pictures at an exhibition. That's the kind of thing you're looking for. Very front of the note, nothing too kind of mushy. You want do, do, really well defined. All right. Okay. And now the famous 8th note pattern here. Now, you can do 2 things. You can learn how to breathe very quickly in between and keep the phrase going. Or if you find that's just not comfortable for you and you prefer to do something else, a lot of people are covering this, but you could, if you wanted to trade with the second trombonist. And so the 4th measure of the 8 notes, the last note is a G. You can leave that out, and the second player can cover that. And then you can cover one of the second player's notes at a later time, the next bar, something like that. So, yeah, just in what they call pesante, which is heavy, right? 1. Yeah. So that's about that. Now, one of the famous, Holst being a trombonist himself, he knew how to write really well. So there's a nice soli, meaning more than just one trombone, to have the whole section playing, certainly the first 2 players, before E, a nice melody, back in the piano again. Now, might have forgot to mention, before B, it's only forte, so you need to make sure that's not too loud, right? It's always a question in ensembles is getting too loud too soon, so you've got to make sure that you're only doing a forte there. Now, here we have piano again. And on and on. That's a piano, and it's got a stay piano, so there might be a tendency as you get higher to sound louder. You got to keep it down because it's not written to get any louder then. All right, and then you slow down, certainly for the majestic finish, maestoso at F, and again, lots of air movement and breathing. You can do, do, be, bo. You can play more often and quicker. You don't want to lose the phrase. So that's about it there. So movement 2 here, there's a couple of little details. Here we go, turning to our metronome again. And it's to work on the shot notes. Here we have an example of a kind of a percussive thing, effect to play. So they have to be accented and short and not too loud. So, yeah, 1 and 2 and 1. And 1. Yeah, well, actually, I'll keep that on. So, yeah, a way to practice it, just to, because the offbeat might not be as comfortable, right? So you just play 1 and 2. Yeah, just kind of get used to, yeah, the whole back. And yeah, for, yeah, that's the AG. The G is going to be, it has to be sharp second, because that whole partial there on trombone is low, right? So, just a little bit of a half an inch going in there. All right. So, yeah, that's the idea is just nice and crisp, and you want to have a release of the note. You don't want to hold back at all. Just simple. Yeah. So, yeah, you have, sometimes I play the F in 6th alternate position. It just kind of lies better that way. Doesn't have to be, but you can try different combinations. It's always good practice to do that, just to try different ways. Yeah. And then the very last little statement, right? Ba, 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 and always like an emphasis towards it. Ba, ba, ba. Right. Here we are at the third movement, the march. So the metronome marking is 128, and the opening portion of it, you're going to be playing offbeats, which is just good to note that you're being supportive role and to kind of keep things moving along, right, rhythmically speaking, with the beat. And then a fairly long phrase of notes that you might have problems running out of air, and if you can take little cat's breaths along the way, in which I will demonstrate. So here we go. 1. Yeah, that last note, you don't want to blast it away. Not too much of an accent, but slowly diminuing. I'll turn that off. Okay, so the last parts of it, same kind of idea. Wherever it's marked staccato, obviously play nice and short. Good. Okay, so I pick up the D. This is where we all go to town. And basically, the only thing to say, it's not like this piece is extremely difficult, but it takes a lot of, there's certain details that one must to respect. And it's finding the proper kind of phrasing. Ba 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 dee da 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 dee da da ba ba. So finding the breath marks and marking them in and making sure that you adhere to them. So 1 yeah, like that. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really essentially it for the piece. Yeah. So I'm hoping you're gonna have a great time playing that. And yeah, oh yeah, just at the end, the trombones have a great lick, and him being a trombonist is kind of a nod to his fellow trombonist. And so the Pio Mosso just before the end. So 1 and.
This is the final video in this series. I hope you found this series useful. Please send us your feedback and questions in the comments section below. Thanks for watching, and keep practicing.